tell the difference and ask for a praying mantis egg case. You take a stick and you touch it. If it's spongy and got a pretty hairdo, well then you can kill it if you want to. If it's hard and stuck tight, leave it alone. It's a praying mantis egg case. Now they look at that pretty hairdo. You know, you would think an insect that pretty, every kid would want to play with it. Well, nature knew that, so it gave them extra special protection because they crawl real slow. I guess y'all know what that is. We used to not have them much. When I was a kid, rare. One day I was giving this talk over in Seguin, just a long time ago. And I was talking about the webworms, and an old gentleman in the crowd, he got excited. He said, Beck, I got to tell you my story. He says, I got one of these big, long machines with a diesel engine on it and a big fan in a tank. He says, I can blow poison to the top of the highest pecan tree. He said, I was going, people hire me, go up in the Guadalupe River bottom and spray their pecan trees. He said, one day I was getting that machine ready, and there was a low-hanging branch with a webworm colony in it, and I happened to be looking right at it when a wasp flew in, captured the webworm, and took it off. He said, I looked back, there was another wasp. He says, I don't know how long that was. He said, but I leaned against that machine and watched, and he said, pretty soon the wasp carried off every webworm. He said, I felt real bad about spraying the rest of the day. Well, I was telling that story to another group. Again, there's an old man in the crowd. Always somebody in the crowd knows something I don't know. If y'all do, speak up. Anyway, there's an old man in the crowd. He said, Beck, let me tell you my story. He said, I learned a long time ago that wasps feed on the webworms. He says, what I would do, the wasps, those webworms, they hide in that web during the day. That gives them protection from the wasp and the birds. And they feed at night when there's no predators out to feed on them. He said, if you just take a stick and tear that web open, he says, then the wasp can get in there. He said, I started doing that, and I'd watch, and at first it took maybe 25 or 30 minutes before the wasp found it. And I kept doing that. Pretty soon the wasp was finding 10 to 15 minutes. He said, I had it down to 5 minutes. He said, now I walk out the back door with a stick, and the wasp follow me. What caused them? When they got that wasp spray, leave the wasp, the yellow jackets alone. They're very beneficial. And they're the intellectuals of the insect world. Entomologists studied all insects. The wasp is the only insect that can learn and even pass knowledge to the next generation. No other insect can do that. Wasp can. And I found out myself. Right there, the yellow jackets. We have these all around our place, and I don't let anybody knock them down. You can talk to them. Once they get to know you, you can pet them. They will not bother you unless you threaten them. They come and have big wasp nests, talk to them, be nice to them, and kind of, stay out of their way for a while, and you'll find out that they won't bother you. I have some people tell me, all I got to do is get within 10 feet of one of them nests, and they come sting me. I say, well, how many wasp nests have you knocked down in your life? I say, well, I'll knock them all down. I said, well, now you understand. Yeah. They are very beneficial. See that wasp nest? That's our back door. These grandkids go in and out all the time. They know the wasp nest is there. Never bother you. You can pet them, talk to them. If you're real careful, you can reach up there and snip that nest loose and carry it off and take a hat pin or something and put it up high where and they'll stay on it. If you want to move it, but you're scared to handle them, well, take a bucket of water and practice, but make a good aim, and splash a bucket of water on them real fast. It'll wet their wings, knock them off, they'll be laying on the ground. Well, hurry up and take the nest loose and go up high somewhere out of the way, not too far off, within 8 or 10 feet, and nail the nest tight. They dry out and they go right to it. Yeah. Splash it. Now, take good aim when you splash that water. Pecan case borers. They're a big problem. Well, a lot of years they would take out most of my pecans. Well, one day I was reading that Organic Gardening magazine, and I saw this ad, this trichogramma wasp, and you could order them. And that's a teeny weeny little bitty wasp, and that egg is smaller than the head of a pin. So I called this guy that was selling them, and he was a farmer, and he was raising them to release them in his fields. And I asked him if he could send me some. He said, yeah, I'll send you some. I'll send me a bunch of them, and I released them. And
did you read the instructions?
I didn't have directions. He just sent me some. Anyway, I released them, and then I read up on that case bearer moth, and it said that moth was going to be flying, I think, the last day in March, first day in April, something like that. So I called this guy again, and I said, hey, send me some more of them. So he sent me some more, and I released them. And by gosh, I got almost 100% control of the case borer. It's a little worm, a moth that lays an egg on the, right on the, let's see if I got a picture of a nut here or not. Lays an egg on the bloom, that egg hatches and feeds around the bloom, and then when the little nut forms, it crawls down and bores into it and hollows that nut out. And then it goes to the next nut because it's bigger, but it needs a bigger nut, and it keeps on until pretty soon it knocks every nut off the tree. And they can wipe out a pecan crop. Well, that year, I did not have a single corn nut case bearer. And I was over in Gonzales, Texas, and an entomologist, state entomologist, Dr. Cole, was over, so I went in to see Charlie, and I told him about my success using that wasp. He kept shaking his head. He said, Malcolm, they don't work. We tried it. I said, well, they worked 100% for me. Nah, you just had a year like that. Anyway, so the next year I tried them the same way. I released early, and then again on that date. Again. And I've been doing it ever since. I don't lose any pecans. Then I got thinking about how come this extension service didn't have success. And then it dawned on me they were releasing on the day that that moth was going to lay her egg. See, they kept out traps. They knew exactly when that moth was going to lay her egg. And they released on that day. Well, my impatience, I released 2 weeks early, always. 15 days early, something like that. So these little wasps were hatching now, and if you keep a light trap out, there's millions of little bitty moths flying around at night. Well, they are reproducing in these other moth eggs. So when my case bearer laid her eggs, the case bearer moth laid her egg, I had millions of these little wasps in my environment. Plus, there were no other moth eggs for them to lay in, so they had to get all of my case bearer moths. So I accidentally released them properly, and I wrote that up and got it published in Organic Gardening Farming Magazine. And I started getting calls from all over the South, Louisiana, Mississippi, and everywhere in Texas. Beck, thanks, man, it worked so good. We're making a pecan crop now, and it almost costs nothing. Y'all recognize her? Fiddleback, brown recluse. Now I got it. And she's very reclusive. They hide. If you got a bunch of junk stacked in a corner or under a cabinet or something, don't go reaching around in there without looking in there first, because that's where they are. And they don't crawl out to sting you. You got to mess with that web before they sting you. And you won't hardly feel it when they sting you. But when it starts swelling up and rotting off, then you know it was a brown recluse. They're bad. I've seen people with meat rotted off their hands and off their knees and everything else. They're bad news. But they showed us the design of the violin, so it's not all bad, huh? See that violin on its back? That's how you tell. But we don't need any of them. There's the black widow. She too is very poisonous. But again, you got to disturb the web. When at first my little farm my dad, after he moved to San Antonio, we had a neighbor, almost a quarter mile away, and everybody had outdoor toilets. Nobody had any indoor plumbing then. And usually these things are always down in those outdoor toilets. That's a good place because there's flies down there and they catch flies. Anyway, this guy got bit. He went out to use the john after dark. And you know where he got bit, and pretty soon it was hurting. And his wife came over to our house and said, "Can you take my husband to the doctor? He's about to die." My dad said when he got to an intersection, he didn't have to blow the horn. That guy was screaming so loud. They hurt. They're very seldom fatal, unless you got a bad heart. However, this spider helped us win World War II. There was a guy in the crowd one day, and he said, Beck, let me tell you my story. He said, during World War II, it was my job to find black widows, hold them a certain way, and tickle them, and they start producing that web. And he said, then another guy would start pulling on that web real slow as she was making it. Then another guy would come along like with tuning forks, and he'd glue that web tight on each fork. And then